Julianne. I mean, there's so much about this that is close to perfection. It's just so eloquent, and it's a beautiful way of bringing these dotted brev level evaluations of the second movement and of all of the evaluations to a close with such a nice piece of work. Excuse me, my throat's a little hoarse. Yeah, it's that's just really wonderful. There's just so many things about it there that are great. So let's let me put my extra screen over on this little. I've got a little thing set up for it. So yeah, before I launch into all the evaluation parts, I just wanted to say and to point out a few things that I think are very strong. I think that the way that you lead into other sections is just really powerful. This, right in here, that's fantastic. Just the different, alternating the different colors and combinations and so on. Yeah, like once again, this is kind of an echo of the previous one. That's really, really great. these sections where you increase the power, boom, yeah, yeah, and yeah, just so many great ways of coming to a conclusion. I would say, like, listening to your mock-up, it has a very bouncy, very staccato-ish kind of a sound on these ending eighth notes. Like in practice, I would want, like, as a conductor, I would want these. Not that I'm a conductor, but if I were conducting this, I would want these sections to to come to a more just like, even if it's just temporary, to more of a concluded feeling. Bum, rather than dunk. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, there's a lot of just all of these, like, ending these sections feel like they're just very staccato-ish. So it's the mock-up's fault, not really yours. But yeah, so like I would say, just like maybe avoid the accented staccato because it just feels so ephemeral. You know what I mean? Yeah, just almost like if this were like an accented tenuto, or even just like no accent at all. If it just ended, you know. Yeah, and just so many cool things. Well, we'll talk about all those, and I don't know if you've been following my evaluation style, but we're going to talk about the double A section, and then the double B section, and then we are going to, when we get to this double bar, we're going to jump back, and we're going to compare each recurring section as we go through. Okay, so that way we make sure that we don't miss anything, and we can compare your different approaches to the little sections that reiterate themselves, right? And I think that's a really effective way, and it also kind of keeps the energy going pretty intensely. So let's start at the beginning here. Okay, do the shifts of dynamic and registers imply contrast of texture? Right? And here they absolutely do. Da da dum, answered by, so loud strings answered by, just like direct transcriptions in the strings, and then in the winds, solo winds, dun, 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 bum, bum. Yeah, and then once again strings answering da da da, bum, ba, da, da, bum, bum. And I just love the horns coming in under here. I feel that that's great. Just it's absolutely perfect. And then this is really lovely right in here. I think it's interesting. Your time signature is more allegro moderato than it is vivace, right? At 120, right? Like, people can feel lively, but they're not playing at a very lively tempo. Right? However, I think that a lot of this could be sped up, and especially if you heed my warnings about a couple of sections that are coming up. And I think also, like, you could be scoring just plain quarter notes in your timpani, unless like it's an eighth note that leads into to the downbeat of the next bar, right? Bum bum. But yeah, I think that, like, all these very, very tight durations are making it way bouncier than it needs to be, right? And especially if you do eventually speed it up to 138, 144, and so on. Well, which I feel you totally could. All right, so with that in mind, I would say just at the beginning, not in all the other sections, but just right here, I think da da da, little meno, and then atava bum ba da da da. Just this one, like I think that there are some orchestrations where I would recommend it happening every time, but just for yours, I would just think like the first time, right? And then, because of the structure of how you deal with these sections and you lead back into the other material again, I would say, like, don't worry about my my evaluation criteria that are listed at the front of this video, that say, like, maybe sometimes you need a little bit of a pausa before going into, like, maybe for between here and there, or maybe between here and there, because, like, the way that you build things, that you build the energy of it, you don't really need that at all, right? That's actually been true of the past, this score and the past two scores before that, Jem Knox's and Charles Gaskell. Neither of those scores required any kind of dramatic pause or anything to kind of clear the air or anything like that. All right, so, oops, I'm going the wrong direction. Yeah, and just, like, I love the way you keep it really, really simple. Da da da, and then all parts doubling, dun da 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 da, or, yeah. Right. Okay. And then here we're getting into, an interpretation of the next part, which I have in my criteria as smooth, not awkward. Right. And then textural expansion, perhaps, to reflect, the crescendo could also have the orchestra getting bigger. You do a teeny bit, like you're starting here from pianissimo, then as you get toward mezzo forte, you've got these little staccatos and so on. It's not really. I mean, there is dynamic expansion though, like in the strings, right, and a little bit more force each time with your winds and brass. All right, so fair enough. And just as a quick note here, obviously you haven't really taken the option of trying to make this sound period, right? It's you bring a lot of Beethoven's sense of surprise and his voice and everything else into it, but you're not literally trying to make it sound as if Beethoven scored it, right? Because obviously you just have fully chromatic horns and trumpets and so on. So yes, it's no big deal, but it's just noting the choice. So it's cool, the double basses and timpani working together. That's very nice. And you just as a note, like with timpani, if this is modern, then your timpani can go up to 4 kettles, as far as I'm concerned. All right. Was that? Yeah. So you do have other pitches, right? But you kind of keep it simple, right? And that's not a bad idea. Okay. All right. So yeah, so like there really isn't a huge difference, between these 3 bars and these 3 bars and so on. We just have the expansion, right? So the question is, does this feel inevitable? I mean, I would say so. Just I think that the pressure here, pushing forwards to the next 4 bars, I think that helps a lot. I think that the coaxing along of the brass and upper winds, I think that helps too. A little touch of pizzicato and timpani. I think that all helps drive it forwards, and especially you'll notice, like if you do speed this up to say 138, then I think you will feel. I think it'll feel even more right to you. And then this this push forward. I like the function of the clarinets here in closing the oboes. And I like the flutes nice and high here, just like not getting mixed up with the oboes and so on, or the clarinets. And then just keeping the bassoons very, very simple, and then the stress and the stress on the half beat. That's really, really great. So so absolutely no problems, no notes. All right. Now moving on. Yeah, dun 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 dun. Then dun 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 dun. Yeah, very, very cool. So here we've got, like, you do a kind of a trade-off with clarinet and bassoon, kind of doing a bit of a dovetail, and then clarinet dovetailing just to the first note on oboe, and then them playing together and so on. So I mean, if it feels right to you, then that's great. I think that there's no need for you to break up the beam groups like this. If the slur is this long, then the beam group should be that long, right? That's a sort of maybe a holdover from the template, right? And this is all very cool too. So my problem is is not so much that anything is intrinsically wrong, especially at 120 beats per minute. My concern is more that this piece has a certain tempo to it, right? And it's going to want to go that tempo. And you can mark it as 120 all you like, but a lot of the times you will be dealing with musicians who may have even played this piece as piano students, right? Especially conductors. A lot of times conductors are pianists. And they might just, feel where the tempo is, and they might want to just start pushing it up to 130, 132, 138, 144. And if that is so, then you are falling into one of my pitfalls, right? Remember, I did talk about this, about, will the players be able to get that absolutely perfect kind of playing? Kind of interesting why these are slur staccato and these are just slurred. But anyways, I'd maybe want to keep it a little bit more uniform. But okay, all that said, I'm worried about rest, tada, rest, tada, rest, tada, rest, tada, rest, tada, rest, tada. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, so these violins doesn't really matter. They're just going da, 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 like right on the beat each time, right? But here you have these players going da 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 da, and they just like without them playing any kind of on the beat pitches, then they just really have the greatest amount of risk of just slightly falling behind the beat, right? Now, over here, you show the way out absolutely perfectly, right? And in fact, like it, might be better off just to make these like this note a 16th and that note a 16th, right? So a little rest here and a little rest in between the two stems. So if you take some of this approach, okay, and you take it back here, and let's say you just leave your violins alone, and they're just going ta-da, 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 right? And then you have your offbeat instruments, like just adding like a little 16th here, just playing unison on the D sharp. So da da da, and then B da da, right? F sharp da da. You see what I mean? So just like to really, just so the player really has, wherever the conductor is putting their baton, wherever that tact is, they are going to be playing right on it, and then they're going to be playing the leftover da-da, rather than just feeling the rest and going da-da, right? So it's the kind of thing that you could get away, like this scoring, you can sort of get away with at 120, but it's going to get pushed faster, and when it gets pushed faster, it's probably going to start to fall apart a little bit. So just anything you can do to, like you might get one reading with this, right? Or you might get like 2 rehearsals and then a concert, right? I mean, this is such good scoring, Julianne. I mean, I hope you get a concert with this. I hope you know somebody who wants to perform it. And the way to just really, really ensure that that's not going to be a problem is just to give the players who have got the off the beat stuff just a little teeny bit of on the beat. Now, if you remember from my pitfalls video, I said, a couple bars, you could just like cut them loose and like not worry about that problem. Maybe even 3, maybe even 4. But 7 bars or 6 bars is a little much. All right? Okay, so those are my notes on that, right? So like there really is nothing wrong with it, and I know that there are probably some wind players out there rolling their eyes and saying, "Oh, we can get right on the beat with that. Don't worry about it." But I have heard situations, maybe some players are not as great as you, right? Or maybe the conductor starts getting a little ahead of the beat, and then there is one person, who just is not paying attention that, and they start treating their ahead of the beat as where the on the beat is, right? And especially if the conductor is playing a little bit ahead of the beat if they don't have the beat. You see what I'm saying? And the music is just going hell bent for leather. That was why I made such a big point about this in the pitfalls, right? Just really making sure, just like you have here, that like everybody's got a reference, right? Now, of course, it's not that I am making such a big deal about this because I think that it's impossible to play at all, but it's just that there is so much of it. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, it's so much of it, and it could get pushed. Who knows? It might get like pushed up to 152, right? Then what do you do? So yeah. So anyways, so that is my lecture on that. But once again, there's nothing really intrinsically wrong, and I feel that the energy and the color is just absolutely gorgeous here. All right. So now we're not going to keep going. I mean, we are going to keep going, but we're going to jump back first and just review really quickly, for everybody who doesn't remember, how Julianne took on these, opening 12 bars or 11 bars, right? Da da dum bum bum ba bum bum, answering in solo winds and so on, and then going to horn for the lower voices, and then this beautiful little pastoral, da 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 ba ba da bum bum, and so on. Okay, all right. So let's look at all of those those statements, right? All right, starting with this part right here, just before double C. So here, we've got sort of a reversal. We have double reeds and horn, right? Such a wonderful combination. So bum ba bum, and then answering in the strings, bum bum ba bum bum, and I feel this is very, very effective. The only thing that I would add as a note is there any role that the viola can play here? Even if it's just like a repeated note in the middle, right? And just to kind of bring the whole, just like have the feeling of the section, just as you do here, right? Yeah, and then pretty much like the same thing, clarinets and trumpet and everything else, right? Da, 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 ba, bum, ba, da, bum, bum. Yeah, clarinet with the flutes over the top. Yeah, just exactly right. Yeah, I just love the little sweetening here, right? Right, and then the answering slightly plaintive, but this I feel it does not need to be. This does not need to be meno mosso. Especially with the horn and trumpet. Bum, 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 dun, 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 dun. And this is just really lovely. We have like the wind section and strings, and once again I would try to see if there is a role that the violas can play here, even if they're just doubling these first few notes of cello or some other kind of thing, or this middle voice in here with the second violins. Yeah, or maybe doubling the horns. Right, it's just the same thing as the cellos. So yeah, I mean, it's just so nice. All right, so let's jump ahead to double E, right? All right, and this is where Beethoven has these big octave chords. Starts off with big octave chords in his. It's actually an octave and a fifth, then going to an octave and a third in his right hand, and then his left hand has got like a interval of a third going to a triad and so on, and then both ending with F sharp major triads. So how does Julianne interpret that? Right. So just very simply, I think that's actually very, very appropriate coming right after this, right? Like you don't overdo it because you have these big pushes that you add later, right? So you keep this mellow, and that's fine. So da da da, and then just bassoons and horns, so beautiful, so absolutely perfect with a little bit of pizzicato on the bottom. Bum 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 bum, da da da, bum 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 bum. Exactly right, right. Then da da da. This I would almost feel like Mano could work here, but like You know what I feel is that I think that it's almost better for you to like not get fancy with the articulations here and just do the same exact pattern as the strings. And I see why you want to do this. You want to have just like a long sustained note, no shaping and no slurring into the staccato, but it's just a little too weird with the with the how it combines with the strings. It's just my feeling. Right, and then da da da, bum 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 bum, and that's so great. Middle strings and horns, right? Yeah, exactly right. All right, so yeah, once again, we're going to talk about all of these, these sections that follow the main theme, but we'll get to that in a minute. Okay, so one more little thing, bar 150. All right. All right, and we're really kind of back to very similar, like a very similar, smaller scope, but it still is something different than the beginning, right? Da da dun, and yeah, and then answered by lower winds. Dun dun da, da, bum bum. Yeah, yeah, and I love the addition of the horns here. Bum 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 with horns. Yeah, it's just exactly right. Bum 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 bum. Da da da. And that's a very cool combination. Clarinets in octaves with a little flute on the top to keep the top clarinet from being too spicy, and the horns below. Right. So yeah, just exactly right. And then lower strings. Dun 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 dun. Bum 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 bum. And we'll talk about this when we get there. All right. So yeah, so those are your four different interpretations of the main theme. Now let's talk about all the ways that you spin off from there, right? So we already looked at the beginning here at the whole thing about smoothly, not awkwardly going forwards. At least, well, not while the texture didn't really expand that much, the dynamics did, and I thought that made it really strong and not too repetitive. And it felt more inevitable going over the same material again. You ended the phrase with finality, framing the next part, right? So that all worked great. So just remember all these things that Julianne did, right? This bum bum stuff going on with the double basses and pizzicato, timpani, and the upper winds and brass and so on. Okay, so now jumping ahead to 43. Yeah, and da 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 bum bum, and you can see it's very very similar. There's a few, there's a couple of dropouts here. You know, very very similar though. Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's no need to leave out the C as far as I can see. Yeah, yeah, but it's really great the way that you set up this chord. I feel that this really scorches. It's really nice. Okay, so let's jump ahead to bar 100. Same basic idea, right? Da da da. All sort of these winds up on top of the strings, and then horns, bum 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 bum, or with the violas and cellos, bum 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 bum. Right. Yeah, and it's just kind of like basically the same idea again, except no timpani at all. Yeah, and once again, this sets things up again the same way. So there's really you chose to interpret it very similar, all three times, and that's totally fine. All right, so now let's check out the double B section. So, so we already looked at this. I already made a few notes, just like, once again, the caution, if this really goes fast, you might want to have like more on the beat kind of stuff for your little flyaway winds. And, of course you could just say, well, Thomas, I disagree, and that's fine, So we're going to look at all of these little sections where Beethoven noodles, right? So at bar 51, he goes down, and I feel that this is absolutely powerful, and it's great, and it's all clarinets. And you've got all these little boink, 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 boink. And then here it starts to get in on the action. And I think this is all pretty playable. Like it doesn't, the slurring doesn't have to follow Beethoven's, da, 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 da kind of idea. Because, like, after all, he's sort of flicking his fingers, you know what I'm saying? Like, to the right or to the left as he plays. Correct? So, these are not the same kinds of instruments, right? So you could get the same exact effect that you want by just slurring across the beam group, right? You know what I mean? Like right in here and so on. Now, we'll talk about it later on here. I feel that this is actually really, the slurring on this is actually really well suited to the strings. But, just in some of these things, just to not get too caught up in Beethoven's very pianistic kinds of slurring. Yeah, like, for instance, this is great right in here, right? We'll talk about how this, what is the blending here in a second. All right, so let's jump ahead to 74. Right, okay, so this one's longer. And, once again, you've chosen to do, like, groups. Like, once again, can join these, especially if you, under a slur that covers 4 notes, have a beam group, or have a beam of, that covers 4 notes, right? And so on. And this is great, da-da, 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 and it's just really, really simple. And then here we, once again, like, you know what I mean? It's like, could you possibly just give, like, a little 16th note on a C to the flute here, and then one on a B flat, and C, B flat, C, B flat, da 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 da, and just like the tiniest little staccato. The thing that will be really, like, since the staccato will be played in conjunction with this note, the ear of the listener will hear the strings more, right? Because they really kind of suck up the timbre of the flute. So you'll get the same effect, but just by adding that one little note, it just really keeps the flute, like, absolutely dead on time. Yeah, and then just like, and then these other things, like, there's no need to do anything to the clarinet part because it's like all right on the beat. Right, but and then here, like I said, maybe the last 3 bars, maybe even. But I would still just give, like, maybe G da da, right? Or G. Sorry, this is actually F. I meant to say, sounding F. And then and then the same thing here. Like, the oboe could be playing the first note of the clarinet just as a little staccato, and because the clarinet slurs and is a little bit longer, the oboe wouldn't really make that much difference, right? And you still get that kind of broken apart effect. And then maybe once you got to about right here, you could just let the oboe, cut it loose, right? Once it's developed up the right momentum, then it can go forwards. All right. So now let's go to 110. So this is the descending one. And you do it exactly the same way. And I really like this, slur 4 to the beam group and so on is better. But this is great, the way that you just slam down into into these bassoons and these octaves. It's so great. Okay, well, we'll talk about that huge rising rush of sound and color. All right, so ahead to 133. Oops, I went past it. All right, so here's the longest one, right? And here Beethoven writes in a pausa, right? Right, and that's one of the reasons why I feel that that pianists, like, they feel that they have permission to put a pausa in everywhere else, right? Because he's got this boom, so, like, there won't be one, but they'll put in a little bit of a pausa to let the air clear a little, right, before they go into their little and once again a 4-note beam group. And this is great. See, this is exactly what I mean. The other things could be like this, dun da da, right? And that could be right here, right? Using some of the notes from the other parts. Yeah, I like using both of the violin groups there. That's very cool. And then kind of going to clarinet, and just like you'll know what my comments are, the same as before. And I think that it would work great. So like, and then maybe like 3 bars before, or two, maybe even 4 bars before, but like not every single bar, right? Just give the player something to pace themselves with. All right, so that is all really great. Now let's jump back to the big uprushing crash. Yeah, so yeah, this first one in D is so great. Subito fortissimo. Yeah, exactly right. Right. So just you want to slap the listener in the face, right? It's a sudden explosion, a fit of temper by Beethoven. So, we have so many concerns here in the evaluation criteria, like as consistency of strength rising through instrumental registers, maintaining textural and rhythmic energy. Right? That is the main one. And then like worrying doubts, right? So it just like has to almost feel like one of those little dogs who's got like a chewed up old shoe, and they're just kind of like, they're kind of thrashing it back and forth in their teeth. It's almost like, I believe that is where the term worry comes from, right? It's the worry sort of goes back to that, that kind of thrashing around, to worry at something is to sort of like try to just kind of snarl, like try to sort of rub it or wrestle with it or whatever, right? Which turned into like that's what we're doing inside with our emotions, right? So yeah, so worrying doubts in both senses, right? It could be, it could be a physical thing, right? Or it could be a mental thing. In Beethoven, it's always both, right? The emotion and the reason and the physicality are all blended together so incredibly well. Okay, so having said all that, we have our violas. I really love that you're using the violas as this, as kind of this, bottom harmony right in here, bum 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 bum, and also the horns, and then dropping, right, which gives us the octave, and then of course we got the clarinets doubling, and then the oboes over that, and so on. So I think that's a great way to bring that line up through underneath the rising chords, right, and then just a big boom right in here. And I think it's really interesting that you leave the you leave this thump until here, right? Boom, da la 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 thump, da la 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 la. Then you go thump, roll forwards again. So it's nice. It keeps things from being too predictable, right? Yeah, and then bringing in the trumpets and so on and so forth, and giving a little bit of extra energy to what's going on in the oboes. And the oboes could easily could also be breaking this down like this too. Right. But the main juicy part that everybody's going to be focusing on is what's going on in the violins. And I think that the way that you've got it scored here is perfectly fine. You could have also gone da 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 with because this accent here, right, on the downbeat and the upbeat, you can easily put that in, kind of giving this a little bit more intensity, right? One thing I will say, the flutes are just really not doing anything until about this D, right? I almost feel like here's a place where low oboes work really, really well. And even though it'll be incredibly coarse, right? If the oboes are going da 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 da, a duet until they get up to this F sharp third, or maybe a little past it, right? It'll be so much more powerful than like the flutes. The flutes are just really not really doing anything. And same thing with this second flute right in here. It's just really not accomplishing a lot. when you consider that you've already got a first clarinet doing the same exact notes, it would probably be better for you just to go a duet with the flutes, over the top, and I think you just get like a much stronger effect. So yeah, so just that's my only doubt here is like pushing the flutes here up to this A or up to this D or whatever. Maybe they could come in on the A or maybe on this D here, right? It just would be so much more effective if you could maybe substitute like oboes or some other kind of thing, maybe done in this configuration here as they go up the scale. And then when we get to the worrying doubts, here you've got a duet flutes playing piano along with clarinets. Here, I think if the flutes are mezzo piano, right, and they're reversed. No, I'm sorry, no, they're on the same pitches with a single clarinet. So I think that if the flutes are at mezzo piano and the clarinet is at piano, I think that there's a chance for a really beautiful blended color here, right? Which I think will make sense alongside the horns. I mean, there's still a danger of the horns absorbing the flute tone. It's pretty big. Maybe, I mean, I hate dynamic mixing. Do you know what I'm saying? I hate to say, okay, well, the flutes should be mezzo piano, and the lower wind should be piano, and the horn should be pianissimo, right? But that's what might end up getting scored in the part or penciled into the part. All right, and then here, like adding this this second horn down here, that's very, very cool on this low D, sounding the same as the bassoon here, and just like giving yourself more beef right in here, right, with the cellos dropping another octave and so on. Such great stuff in here, Julianne. Yeah, and then once again the worrying doubts, and then this just becomes very much like the section before double B. And I just really, really like the way that you've scored this with the separated notes, and I feel it's just so much stronger, right? And then bassoon, followed by cellos and bassoons, then the double bass is taking more and more of a role. Yeah, and then the energy builds up here, and then once again, I really don't think there's any reason. Is there any need for you to go tie? Do you just see what I'm saying? It might be easier just go tie, right? In this case, ta 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 with the upper flute is great, but the lower flute could be going tie. Another thing that you could do is like here at the end, no slurs in the winds, right? That way, just like we really get this, bum, right? I mean, you could even accent these last four notes. You don't have to, but I mean, it's just a thought, just like to really like drive it home. Okay, so now let's take a look at how you did the other section, which is very similar to this. Right, the one in F. Boom, right? And we just have very similar things going on. Your flutes have got more of a chance at first, but I mean, it would work even better with oboes up to this point, and then just have the oboes take over and going doink, 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 right? And then the strings work really, really great. No matter what you do here, they're going to sound fantastic. And then horns, yeah, just and then with the trumpets coming in late, it's just exactly right. Boom. Yeah, and then our little worrying doubts, I think, work even better. Up a minor third. Yeah, and right. Boom, 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 boom. Yeah. I want to stay away from dynamic mixing. I think that the players will work it out, but the first horn is putting the duet flutes in a lot of danger there. Okay, and then just the same thing again, which works really, really well. Yeah, and then look, see, you're doing it exactly as prescribed by Dr. Goss, right? So just take that particular approach. Yeah, and just what I said before. And then this da 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 da. I just really, really love it, and I think that like it's a place. It's like for these last two bars, it's a place where you could just basically have everybody just go, da 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 da, right? Even just clarinet and everything else, so that you just really are just slamming that home, just da 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 da, boom, right? And yeah, not too short because it just has to really come to an end. Rest. What is going on? Just Beethoven is having some fun with us, right? This is one of his favorite pieces to play, even though he was kind of getting deaf. So he would just like sit down at the piano and he would, he just this sonata, also like the Sonnenfels sonata, like is it Sonnenfels? It's the one that's right after the so-called Moonlight Sonata, the one in D. I really like to play the D minor movement of that. The bum 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 bum. Right, that one. And I have to say, I mean, I agree with him. I played that sonata actually in performance, and it's one of my favorite things to play. It's just so great, except for the last 8 bars, the last movement. They're just so insane. He just really makes sure, like, Beethoven scored these sonatas as a kind of a midway point in technique. They were just easy enough for dedicated amateurs to perform mostly correctly, and then he would throw in stuff like that little coda at the end of that sonata. I guess is that Opus 28 or I don't know. Anyway, so yeah, and that man, I just you just kind of have to be born being able to play that one to feel easy about it. Alrighty. Okay. So that leaves nothing but the coda. Alright? Alright. So dun 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 ba ba dun 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 dun. I just really love the way that you just very slowly let this grow. Right? It's just like a little tree. Da da dum, bum 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 bum. Right, so it's just like lower strings, and then adding horns, right, with a little bit of bassoon. So like you don't even need any more strings, any middle strings now. Bum ba da dum dum dum. All right, and now all the strings, right? Or there's no double basses, but all the strings, but the double basses. Bum ba da dum dum. Yeah, and just adding a little clarinet with horns and bassoons. And then and then just like just more and more juice here from your strings and from clarinets and so on, right? Yeah, it's just so nicely done, and just little hits on the timpani. Yeah, like this particular section of this sonata was one of the things that made me feel that it would be really, really great as a, to be orchestrated, right? And especially in a challenge. I just could not wait to see how people would interpret it, right? And just like that beautiful warmth that he, the soul, right? He's had his fun with us. He's messed with our minds. And now he's going to show why he's a genius, right? Yeah, and this was something that I saw in another score. The idea of a tenuto, right? So it is pushing forwards. It's not really a slur, but it is one solid note without any shaping, right? Yeah. Da 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 da, right? Or da 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 da, right? Yeah. Bum bum ba-dum bum bum ba-dum bum bum. I really love the way that you give we give our poor benighted violist, a neglected violist, something to do here, and the contrary motion right in here in the clarinet and the oboes and so on. It's just so nice, so nicely done. Yeah, and then just very simply stated, a little chord here in our winds, right, and then these little flurries. I think it would be, yeah. There might be a bit, an easier way of stating this, so that the players don't have to count 15. Do you know what I mean? Okay. But, no problems for me. Then, ba da 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 da. Yeah, and that's cool. And then, answered by, horns and clarinet. Yeah. And you just really pick up the speed here. There could possibly be a bit more. I mean, like, yeah, if you double more things here in your middle strings, you might obscure the clarinet and bassoon. I mean, I see the logic totally. Yeah, so just do the same slurring pattern here as the strings. You just want the unity, right? And then yeah, cut this slur here, right? And yeah, and then I would say get rid of the staccato. Like either have an accent or like don't like don't let the like Beethoven is using the resonance of his piano's harp, right, to make this sound fuller than it would be orchestrally, right? So I just think that I think it's just too short, accented staccato eighth note, right? So I think that it could just be like an accented eighth note, right? Almost even an accented tenuto eighth note. But it's also your sound set is making things feel too abrupt, I feel. Yeah, so that is one hell of a score, Julianne. I just really loved it, and I think I've looked at your stuff before and just really admired like the amount of thought that you put into things. Um, it's like you don't do things by accident. You really think them through, and you develop your material, and your colors are always really nice, and there's a lot of logic to it. And I know I am being really picky about that whole thing about the pacing during the very freeform parts. But it's just because I think that I would really like to see this performed someday, right? And at the actual marked tempo of Allegro Vivace. Do you know what I mean? Just up that tempo to 138 or 144 and listen to it. And then see if that changes your decisions on any of the slurring, any of the way that the parts bounce off of each other, right? And then, see any changes that I might have suggested. If they are useful to you, use them. If they're not, don't worry about it and try to get it, try to get a reading or a performance or something. All right. I mean, and I could repeat that about many scores that I've seen recently. Yeah, and I'm just I'm so kind of gutted that it took so long for me to get my health together. You guys probably remember that, like I just started to lose my ability in September. I just started of 2 years ago, just getting sicker and sicker. Finally by October, I just had almost practically given up on everything. And then, a few months later, I tried to make a comeback, and I managed to get a few out, and my health just caught up with me again. So I'm so happy that, despite everything, I still am a bit under the weather. There's no question. It's going to be a while longer, but I have this nice little window right now where I am able to look through these scores, evaluate them, and just get a lot of joy out of it. And so So please, everybody out there who feels the way I do about this, please give Julianne your constructive comments, positive feedback, just anything you would want to hear as an orchestrator with your efforts. And Julianne, if you have time to spend some time with the other orchestrators who have scored some things in this challenge that I've recently evaluated. I mean, especially in this category right here, this sort of subcategory of movement 2 scores. I think that people would really appreciate your perspectives. Right? Okay, so that is all for today. Tomorrow we are going to completely change tracks, and we're going to go back to my website subscriber category and look at a massive compilation of very short scores covering the beginning of movement 1, and it's going to be really amazing. There are only 2 of these left, right? We're going to do one this weekend, and then all of the longa evaluations, and then we're going to do the very last one of those website subscriber compilations right at the end. All right? So, are you with me? I can't hear you. Oh, no, just kidding. I can hear tinnitus, so I'm going to go take a little break now, and I'm so glad that I was able to make it through this evaluation today. It's just really awesome, and I hope you guys enjoyed it too, and I'll see you tomorrow.